Hey, Facebook, we're live here. I got Mr. Oliver next to me, I guess to my right, your left, and I got our former, our former college band director and composer, and a giant in the band world. And speaking of giants in the band world, Robert, when you first said this to me, probably we were in college. We had to be in college because you're the director. You said you don't know how important it is, and the people that are coming to the Seuss functions and the just getting in here, the giants that are coming in, don't realize it until you've been teaching a little bit. And I can't say that how right you were, and then I can't say how right you were about the fact of who you are and what you have accomplished too. And we'll get into that more later, but I needed to tell you that right off the bat, just because of the fact that you as a young, ignorant college student, where you think you know something, and just to have you tell us that and not realize what it meant until we started teaching and getting into this, it just really means a lot. But we'll get more into that later. But we're here with joined with Robert W. Smith, and we're just going to have him tell his story of how he got started in band, and we're going to take questions, of course, and just start. We're just going to start from the beginning, right? We're going to start from the beginning. When did you start band, and how did you get involved, and why did you stick with it?
Well, first off, it's good to be here. Good to see everybody. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and my two wonderful colleagues here. Not only former students, but friends and colleagues. I love this part of our lives. What a wonderful time it is. My entrance into music actually happened before band. And I come from a musical family. My father was United States Army from New York and Pennsylvania, and went into the Army. He ended up being stationed at Fort Rucker, Alabama, Camp Rucker it was called at the time. And so was stationed there in his military service, and met a local girl. He spent his off days, he liked to swim, so he was a lifeguard at the Lake Thalaco, which is on the Fort Rucker, the base, military base there. So he was out lifeguard stand, and there were a couple of local girls that showed up. One of those ended up being my mom, and they happened to connect and fell in love, got married, and a couple of years later I showed up. Well, with that in mind, on my mother's side of the family, music was running through the family. Most of it, however, was through the church and the good old Southern Baptist Church. My grandmother, she passed away a few years ago. What an amazing woman. She passed away about 5 weeks shy to her 102nd birthday. So she was with us for a very long time, and about 101 years that life was truly amazing. Most everybody in the Deep South knows my grandmother. She's that lady that's in that church that's been playing organ for 40 plus years, and then finally retired from the organ and sat in the second pew and sang alto really loudly during all the hymns. You got to be from the Deep South to know what I'm talking about. But I think maybe there in Hazelhurst, Georgia, you probably have a few of my grannies there in Hazelhurst, and just amazing. So I grew up listening to her play. She had taught my mom to play. My mom, I was actually living in Europe. My dad was stationed in Europe. I spent 4 years of my extreme youth there living outside of Paris. There was a military base there called Poste-Vilaine. It's near Bar-le-Duc, Toul, Nancy. Anybody look kind of northeast of Paris, you'll see that area. So my early memories are my mom sitting there playing piano. I just thought that was the most magical sound could possibly be. And she's got pictures of me sitting there and reaching up and touching the keys and really falling in love with the sound. We ended up coming back from Europe, went back to Fort Rucker. My dad was stationed. He was in Army aviation. So he was stationed at Rucker, being the aviation center. And my grandmother being there. And so I went to my mom took me to the local piano teacher, her name, Joan Marchman. And she said, yes, I'll take him as a student, but he's got to be at least 5. It's got to be 5. And I was younger than 5 at that moment. So on my 5th birthday, my mom took me to her front door, and I knocked on the door, and I said, I'm 5. And here we go. And I started piano lessons. I owe the world to Joan Marchman. And again, like you were talking, when you're young and you don't really realize the impact on your life. Here was this really wonderful teacher who, by the way, in our world, got her degree from Troy State University, Troy College at that point in time. Just really amazing teacher. And I didn't realize till later on that what she had done for me. She really had gotten inside my head, hopefully figured out that maybe I had maybe a small little little shred of talent. And I realized later on that I knew enough music theory at 7, 8 years old. I could have probably passed the freshman final exam in Theory 101. She had taken me that far. I go back and look and find myself at 7, 8 years old writing words like tetrachords, okay, and tessitura and range and modes and things along those lines. It really hit me when I turned 40. I'm 61 now. It hit me when I turned 40. And by the way, you guys were students of mine the day I turned 40. We were in Troy, Alabama together, you know. And my mom, as you may remember, my mom would come to she was always there at all the band concerts and rehearsals, and just a really wonderful, supportive lady. She came up and she handed me a little book. It was a little manuscript book. And in it was, just some simple little melodies that were written in a child's hand. But I'm looking at it and I'm going, Mom, what is this? She said, this was your composition book when you were, 6 and 7 and 8 years old. Wow. And I'm reading this from the mind of a child, and I realized, wait a minute, you could tell it's a child because every note was perfectly round. It's like watching a great elementary teacher, how they write so incredibly neat so that it's consistent so children can read. Boy, my manuscript was big. It was infantile, but it was very legible. Right number of beats. And then I started looking and playing these little melodies that had come out of my head and 7 and 8 years old. And I went, well, I mean, there's melody, there's modality here, there's structure. So my plan with that book, I still have it. Okay. And I'm going to celebrate my 80th birthday by taking all those melodies and writing a new symphonic suite based on those melodies so that they will represent an entire lifetime of music. That's going to be an interesting project when we get there. So let me fast forward. I'm playing piano and I'm playing recitals and I'm going at it. And I thought for sure I was going to be a concert pianist. All of a sudden, 5th grade shows up and I join the band. I walk in, I pick up a trumpet, and I'm going to play trumpet. No doubt I was going to play trumpet. So I go in, I pick it up, I walk into that band class for the first time. Do you remember, I know everybody does, but do you remember watching the first time when you saw The Wizard of Oz, the classic Wizard of Oz that came out in the late 30s? Do you remember when it went from black and white to color? Mm-hmm. I had that moment in the band room because I had been studying in black and white, the black and white keys metaphorically, but just one timbre in piano. And I had been writing, but the moment it went into color, all the colors of the sonic spectrum, that was a life-changing moment for me. And I'll never forget it. So that's how I got into band. Had a really great band director who not only taught me well, gave me private trumpet lessons, but he also encouraged me to write. And so by the time I'm in middle school, I'm actually writing arrangements for the middle school band. I'm writing arrangements for the high school band. There's a moment where we wanted to play Irving Berlin's White Christmas. I wanted to play that on the Christmas concert. He said, well, why don't you write it? So I went home that weekend and I wrote it and came back in, gave him the score in parts, and he actually stopped what he was going to do in band and he actually read it for me. And to get that kind of feedback and response was truly amazing. Next thing you know, I'm writing the marching band shows and it goes on from there. So band was an important part of my development, and I am particularly grateful to those teachers, Joan Marchman and Ski and Susie Winter. I cannot say enough about them, those that really developed me to the nth degree. Alex McCrae, Don Tillery, those were directors I had just before the Winters. And it was just amazing what they did for me.
Man, that is outstanding, especially that little book. I think I always remember your mom coming to the concerts, and I want to vaguely I recall something like that, you telling that story about your manuscripts one day in symphonic band class, or symphony band class. And I just, when you were talking, I was just coming up with all these memories. You know how your memory flashbacks to college, and that, man, it was just, I wish I was that talented. I wish I had that much talent in my little, as much as your talent you have in your pinky as I have in my entire body, man. Because I have to work hard at what we do. It was so hard. And
on that subject though, I just speaking as teacher to teacher, mm-hmm. I think that everybody has incredible creative and musical talent. Creative talent can be manifested in so many different ways. Music is one of them, but I think there's a musician in all of us. I was lucky I was around a couple of teachers, some very significant teachers that brought that out in me. And that's why, your students are so fortunate to be working with the two of you. I know you well. Okay. I know you extremely well. I knew you both when you were literal high school students. That's when we first met, and then coming into college and your careers. But they're very fortunate that this program is one great example where you care about your students. And so to bring out the best in your students, find their superpower. And I believe everybody can write one great song. It might take you a whole lifetime, okay? But I think everybody can write one great song. The pros are the one that can write one great song a day,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But anyway, our teaching system, our education system is so incredibly important to bringing out the best in what every human being has to offer.
You talked about having a moment when it kind of became clear as far as when you switched and you started picking up trumpet. Was there a moment like that when you decided that you were going to become a teacher, that you knew that you wanted to be a band director, so to say?
Yes, there was. I thought that I was going to be a concert pianist. Then I fell in love with the sounds of the band, and that got me to the sounds of the orchestra. Although I didn't grow up around the orchestra, I had to develop orchestral chops beyond that in college. Actually, in my master's degree is where I finally was able to start writing for orchestra. But the moment back in high school to actually sit there and watch the teaching process, there was a moment. It had to do with Ski Winter, Dr. Clifford M. Winter, our band director, and he had come. We were rehearsing, getting ready for our music, what we call now MPA, performance assessment. And I was in a little bitty high school band in Daleville, Alabama. And you have an idea of what it sounds like. But to watch him rehearse us, watch his sequence, watch how he drew the most incredible things out of the band. But the moment was the day after the festival. And the moment was when he put on that. It was an old reel-to-reel tape, but it was the recording of our performance, that performance assessment. And all of a sudden I could hear from an ensemble perspective what we sounded like, and it shocked me. I could not believe our band sounded like that.
Because you're used to hearing just
I'm used to hearing it from the trumpet section. Mm-hmm. I always contend, by the way, I can listen to a band and more than 50% of the time, about probably 80 to 90% of the time, if it's a young teacher, I can tell you what instrument you play, because the band is overbalanced with that sound, because that's how you're used to hearing the band. Okay. Having podium ears, which is also producer ears, by the way, in the world of media. Conductors and producers do exact same thing. We have to have big ears to make sure we're listening from the large perspective. So I'm listening to that recording of us and going, I cannot believe we sound like this. And then very shortly to, auditioning for drum major, being able to conduct the band, being able to work the band, it became very, very clear. I loved that interaction. I love music is wonderful. It's an incredible art form. But to put it simply, do you believe music is a language? I do. And thus it's designed for us as humans to communicate. And the idea of teaching and conducting and working with live musicians and using that universal language of music, that is thrilling to me. In fact, as a composer, I've written a lot of music in my lifetime, and I'm very thankful and I'm very appreciative that people program the music. But I got to tell you, I just draw maps for a living. When you hold that page up to your ear, there's no sound. The sound's in the ensemble. There's no sound here. It's just a road map. And we, the conductors, we're just traffic cops, aren't we? Stop, go, more, less, faster, slower, and the music lives inside the musicians. And so that interaction and hearing that and watching Dr. Winter put that together, that was truly a pivotal moment in my life. I've had 3 or 4 pivotal moments. That's one of them. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah. So after you were at Daleville, and then you went to school at Troy State at the time, and we're all Troy Trojans here, which is a great school, and we want everybody to go to Troy and participate in the music programs. So how long were you at Troy? And because you graduated kind of early, if I recall, correct?
Yes, based on what people call the normal track. Yes, I graduated a little bit early. That let me explain it. Then I'll tell you how I got there. Okay. So yes, I actually stretched my college career out to 3 years. It took me 3 years to graduate. I could have done it in 2. And that's there for several reasons. Okay. So I actually started as a full-time college student in the fall of 1977, and I graduated in the spring of 1979. Okay. Now, how did I get there? Remember, I told you I grew up in France, and I had 4 years there. So I went to DoD schools, and I was impacted by the French educational system. When I got back to the United States, I was a year ahead already. Okay, so I was a year ahead in school. So I went back to Fort Rucker, took some testing at Fort Rucker Elementary, and I just skipped kindergarten and went right to first grade. Okay, so that put me a year ahead. My birthday is October 24th, so I'm already the youngest in that class. Okay, there are people that are almost a year older than me that are in the same class. I was right at the deadline there, but I was the youngest in my class, so that put me almost a year ahead. Then in my senior year of high school, the Troy State University at the time, had a program where you could do a little bit of an early admission, and many colleges do that now. We can start taking college courses and credits. So I only needed a couple of high school credits left to graduate. So I actually, bless my mom. I don't know how she did it, but I'm 16 years old. I moved to Troy, get an apartment. I'm at Charles Henderson High School for 2 periods a day, and I played in the Charles Henderson High School band. Okay, and Bill McRae was the band director at the time, and so what a wonderful opportunity. But I was in class at Charles Henderson for two hours, did the high school band. The rest of the time I was on the campus at the university and studying. So when I got to Troy as a full-time student, I had a fair amount of credit, and then there's a thing called the CLEP test, college level examination program. So that's a kind of a general studies type test, and I clept basically my general studies in one test. So I'm 16 and I'm a junior at Troy. That's the end result. Okay, so I would have graduated when I was 18, but I stretched it out to 19, and in 19 into my year 20. I started, though, by the way, I was very fortunate in Troy. There's a private school, Pike Liberal Arts School, and they had a music program. I became the band director there while I was still in college, and so had great students. We had an incredible band. So thankful for each and every one of them. But what an amazing experience that was. And Delaney Curvin, Mr. Curvin over there, the administrator, I owe him a lot for believing in a young man and being able to build a band program, and we did. And so when I took my first big high school job, which was in Tampa Bay, Florida, by big I mean a large school. It was a school of over 2,000 students in it, but I was just 20 years old when I took that position. So yeah, I was just a little ahead. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. It happened to work for me, but I tell my daughters I don't recommend you taking this route. Let's do it in a little bit more comfortable pace.
Take your time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, you gotta grow up. I mean, I can't imagine. I remember my first job was in Georgiana, and I graduated in December and got hired in January. And I remember I had a senior. I think I just turned 22, so I was not old, but I wasn't young either. I had a senior who was 20 years old in the class. And that was strange for me just to go through that. So I couldn't imagine being 20 years old. Here we are in Tampa, Florida, with going to FBA and bands and assessments and everything. So
yeah, I've got plenty of former students that are friends now that are almost my age. But I do have, from those early Pike Liberal Arts years, I have a couple of former students that are my age. So there's a really fine drummer graduated from Troy, Dave Campbell, man, great percussionist, Dave Campbell. Okay, he was in that band at Pike Liberal Arts. Okay, Connie, unbelievable. She just finished out in Jay, Florida, band director in Jay, Florida. And she played trombone in that band. So really great people.
Well, so you started your career. So tell us a little bit about your career in Florida. And I know that you worked with the Suncoast Sound and Magic of Orlando. Just we want to hear about you and your career path. So how did you get to where you are today, working back at Troy? Because I mean, it went full circle twice for you.
Yep, it did. I left. I graduated officially in spring of '79 from Troy State University. My roommate here at Troy had come from Largo High School, and Largo is there in Tampa Bay in Pinellas County. And they had a really fine band, have a fine band at Largo. Coincidentally, by the way, we could come to that later, but now my daughter, who just graduated from Troy last year, is now the choir teacher and musical theater director at Largo Middle School. She's literally 40 years almost to the day. She's about 2 miles from where I started. So that's pretty amazing. Funny how full circles run. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I applied for a job at Pinellas Park High School. The gentleman who was the director of the band at Largo High School, his name was Robert Cotter. Has a son, by the way. Band directors who may be watching this, you may remember an arranger's name by the name of Robert Cotter Jr. And has a very successful career in arranging and publication. Anyway, Cotter Sr., Robert Cotter Sr., Mr. Cotter was the director at Largo, but he had started the Suncoast Sound. So they had just started, and I had just gotten hired. And so being one of the local band directors, I got a call saying, would you be interested in maybe coming and working with the brass section? I had a little bit of drum corps experience. Previously, while I was in the Troy area, there used to be a corps here in Alabama, Richard Beasley, who used to be the director. Dr. Long was at the University, of course. At Charles Henderson High was Richard Beasley, Dick Beasley, everybody knew him as. And he had started there was a drum corps in Troy called the Charioteers. Mm-hmm. I spent one summer with them. They were based in Birmingham at that point. And so the fact that I had some drum corps experience, Mr. Cotter said, hey, this new band director understands drum corps. So I joined the staff, the teaching team there at Suncoast Sound. It was their first year. That was not their regular season. They rehearsed and they went to England and spent a month in England performing for the British government at what's called the Royal Tournament. It's a kind of a military kind of tattoo and exhibition. And so spent the month in Europe and then came back and Suncoast did 2 shows and then DCI championships. And during that time we were in England, we unfortunately had a situation with the drum major of the corps where he could not continue. And so coming back and 2 shows, and that was going to be pretty problematic. Mr. Cotter looked at me and remembered that I was under 21 when I took this job. So I went from being on the brass staff to putting on the drum major's uniform. So actually, if you look at Suncoast Sound in that 1979 year, those historic photographs, that's me on the podium, when you look at that. So here we go. And Suncoast Sound, we did our 2 shows, and there were 41, I believe, groups. If I'm off, I'm only off by 1. But there were 41 groups there. We finished 40th. We finished next to last, And so that's the bad news. The good news was there's no place to go but up. And
that's right.
And so we did. And so I, again, joined the corps staff, enjoyed that season. The next season continued with them. And we got about halfway through the second season in 1980. And Mr. Cotter, we got about halfway through the season. He had some personal things come up, and he called me over. There was a show at Whitewater, which was kind of the DCI big event in the middle of the summer where everybody gets together and competes against each other. And after that, Mr. Cotter pulled me over and said, "Hey, I've got to take care of a situation. The corps is yours. You take this, And so took the corps back. We had some time in between seasons. There were two tours in a season at that time. And so we went back, made some musical adjustments, rewrote the entire drill. And by the way, when we were in Whitewater, we were still 40th. We were still next to last. We went back, rewrote the entire drill in about 10 days and changed one piece of music, came back out, did the second tour. And when the season was over, we had moved up 10 spots. And so we had gone from 40th to 30th. So then I took over full-time program coordinator with the corps, still the brass caption head and whatnot, but working with the team and putting shows together with some incredibly talented, gifted colleagues that are still making marks today. And we went from 40th to 30th to 21st to 13th to 6th. and we stayed there, and we had a pretty respectable horn line way back when. And I'm so very fortunate. People will maybe point and say, "Boy, you did that." The honest answer is no. Those students did that. They worked. I helped facilitate that. I had incredibly gifted colleagues. My associate with the brass line, I hired Frank Williams. Some of you know who Frank Williams is, local band director, and Frank and I started doing that group together. And Frank and I complete each other when it comes to that brass line. He was responsible for the technical program. I was responsible for the artistic, the interpretation, the expressive, and then dealing with the program as a whole. People like Michael Rayford, who still has an impact. You look at the Blue Coats now, all those incredible visual designs, props, costume, that's all Michael. Okay, he's still making incredible impact. Alan Murray handled percussion. I hired Alan out of Canada, and he came down. And you would know him most recently. He was with System Blue. He's with Dynasty, developing all those percussion, those instruments, those percussion lines, and really, really amazing gentleman. Russell Stanton was doing the drill at that time, and so I could go on and on and on. The current artistic director for WGI was a Suncoast staff member. That's Carl Lowe, and oh, Carl the World! What an incredible, incredible creative mind. So that Suncoast era for me in the 80s was very special. I got to learn from a lot of great students, and I got to learn from a lot of great colleagues, and really enjoyed that time. From there in the 90s, then that became the 90s was the decade in Orlando with Magic of Orlando.
Yeah, and that's where Jimmy, is that where you met Robert?
That is 1994. Yep, that was my first year there, and it was an amazing experience, that's to say the least.
Yeah, I remember Jimmy coming in as a high school tuba player, and here we go, and the rest is history. And in fact, Jimmy's at Troy. I brought him to Troy, to come play at Troy, and look at how it changed his life.
Oh, it completely
by the way,
changed.
Your children, you're welcome.
Yeah, my wife, my children. You're exactly right. I mean, there is no truer statement than that. I mean, I'm sitting at a banquet, getting ready to go in after I age out in 1997. And I'll never forget, you were walking in and you came right over to me. You said, "What are you doing about school? I know you've aged out and you haven't really been doing anything." You said, "I just got that job at Troy this summer. It's been my first year. What do you think about coming to school on a scholarship?" And I was like, "I don't even know where Troy is." You said, "You know what? Call me Monday." You gave me your card, said, "Call me on Monday. We'll set it up." And I came up in January at Seuss. And like I said, the rest is history. And I couldn't even find Troy on a map if you asked me to. You're just like, "Don't even worry about it. I got you. Just call me and come on."
Troy's a pretty special place. It's what many people consider a small town, but the impact of this university is pretty significant. We can trace that to Dr. John M. Long, really being the roots of that, and even in the idea of composers. Look at the number of composers and published writers that have come out of Troy. It is shocking. The number of people that had a significant impact on music publishing, particularly music education. A lot of that, by the way, when I came to Troy as an undergrad, just to go back just a bit, I decided to go to Troy. I was looking at a number of different universities, but I decided to come to Troy. Dr. Long, to play in his band, was going to be something really special. But he also had hired really great people, and he hired a gentleman by the name of Dr. Paul Yoder. Dr. Paul Yoder's picture hangs in that MBA Hall of Fame that's on our campus. And Dr. Yoder was an incredible composer, writer, and he spent 2 quarters a year at Troy. And I went there also to study with Paul Yoder, and I owe him the world. Dr. Long for so many things, but you know what? Dr. Long also created an environment for me to flourish. And Dr. Yoder, in terms of writing, is the one that really, really nurtured me in that particular area. So I'm grateful to Dr. Long and grateful to Dr. Yoder. And so it's that kind of story that Jimmy here is telling that becomes so important. You don't know about those little crossroads in life, those little forks in the road, and I'm going to do this, and how it's going to impact. You wouldn't be sitting in Hazelhurst, Georgia right now, okay, if we had not had that conversation and you not come to Troy that February for the Southeastern States Clinic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, my high school band director, I loved, and he's actually retiring. This is his farewell, I guess, would have been in March now because of this. But, he was the one that really, had a huge passion. And I know when I came and joined the horn line in '94, just just something about how you taught, and it was more than just the notes on the page. Like you say, it was the musicianship and the artistic expression that really opened it. And it just took me to a whole nother level, and it gave me a passion for my music that I try to share with my kids. I try to talk to them all the time. You can play right notes and right rhythms, and that's great. But, the computer can do that just as well if you don't have any kind of emotion and any flow to it. So that's something that that's the biggest thing that I took away from being one of your students in that horn line, and then again at Troy. So,
well, you're very kind, and I know you're both now beginning to experience that. But the good news for you both is the best is yet to come. It's when your students grow up, when you start looking at their experiences with you, and you see how it manifests in their lives. I'm so proud of both of you, as are the other thousands. I have thousands and thousands of students in my teaching history, but I look at the two of you and look at that single impact, and the wealth and the richness that brings to my life is just amazing. It's immeasurable and priceless in the most purest form.
Well, I appreciate that. If we're talking about memories, I remember the first time you and I actually met.
I was wondering if this was going to come up.
Well, I remember that meeting.
Yeah. And, I had a couple of those my first couple of years at Troy, and me being a beach kid, I wasn't going to college. I was going to stay on the beach, but I decided to follow a girl up to Troy and be in love. But, I
owe her a thank you, whoever she is.
Yeah. But, but it's just, I wouldn't trade my experiences for anything. And to know, and if I didn't have that conversation with you that first day, with you holding that scholarship letter and saying, I can rip this up and you go back to Panama City, I don't know if that impact, and with Ralph Ford calling me an MUS 101 underachiever, those two things were probably the two turning points of my life. Cause I was told that my entire life, but for some reason, when you held that piece of paper up and you said you're going to rip it up, I was like, well, okay, I guess I better get my act together, but I just appreciate that kicking me in the rear end when I needed it, all the time.
Teaching is it's a priceless profession. There's no question, but there's a price to it for teachers, because sometimes, there's a price to leadership, and you're going to have people that don't like what you have to say, but you have to say it. And it's always been my philosophy, as long as we have the best interest of our student in mind and we're looking at the big picture, the long haul, that is so incredibly important, and those are tough. I'm sure you've experienced those kinds of moments, when you have to have those tough talks like you and I had that one time. Yeah. But man, oh man, was it worth it? Here we are all these years later. It's over 20 years later, and here we are. I believe was in the fall of 97 or 8. When did you come in?
98.
98.
Yeah. So it's, 22 years. That was a good conversation. Here we are 22 years later, and we're great friends, and we're connected. And your wife, the great Kelly, the incredible guy, she was a student of mine in a totally different way, so a totally different area. But, it's wonderful to see things come, as you said earlier, full circle. And here we are 22 years later.
So speaking of the other aspect of what you do, we know that you were the band director, and then you spent some time doing the full-time composer after you left Troy, correct?
Yes.
As the band director. And then now you're come again back to Troy University with the music industry program.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit about the Troy Music Industry Program, because I'm sure there's some kids that love music, but they're not all sold into being a band director, so to speak. What is this new outlet, or this outlets we're using to train kids in another way?
Absolutely. If you go into the Jeff Davis band room and you have a band rehearsal, the only thing in there that's music ed are the humans. Mm-hmm. It's the teachers and the students. Everything else got there from the music industry. Where did the instruments come from? Where did the music come from? Where did those chairs come from? Where did those stands come from? Where did the instrument racks come from? Uniforms. Everything else is music industry. So sometimes I think that when we're going through the process, the educational process, we think music education, which is incredibly important. By the way, it's the most important of all our music professions, because that's where our music of the future is coming from. Okay, that sounds flowery and like a cliche. It's not. It's absolute truth. However, the music industry is around us all the time. And so I think sometimes in music ed and music education situations, we really don't necessarily make the connections for our students. For example, mine, you have a little bit about my background. I was writing, and I'm a young band director, and I had an opportunity. I was doing drum corps. It was 1983, and it was the championships in Miami. And a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jack Bullock, who ended up being the vice president, of Columbia Pictures Publications. He was the educational product line manager, and he came and found me literally and said, "Hey, I'd really like to talk to you about arranging, for publication." And 2 weeks later, I was on a plane and I was meeting with him and the president. By the way, the president of that corporation at that time, that company at that time, you would know him as FJH. That's Frank J. Hackinson, And so here I was teaching, but I was involved in the music industry, particularly music publishing and the creation of music. Everything begins with the composer, songwriter, and publisher. There's no reason to buy a guitar if there are no songs to play. Somebody has to create the songs. So we can talk that track maybe at a different time. But my point here is that I worked in two worlds, education and in the music industry. So with that in mind, while I was the director of bands at Troy University, I had a proposal for the university we were looking on how to grow our School of Music, and I suggested that we really should look at a music industry program for lots of reasons. And so university took that under consideration. I had left. I am tied to Troy for all time. I am eternally grateful to Troy. This is home. However, I had an opportunity to go do a large project for Warner Brothers. And through my publishing endeavors, I started with Columbia Pictures, then a couple of corporate mergers. And then beginning in 1990, it became Warner Brothers Publications. And I was with them for 16 years. So I had an opportunity with Warner Brothers. It's one of those opportunities that I really could not turn down. I left the university on really great terms. I'm dear friends to this day with Chancellor Jack Hawkins, one of the greatest educational leaders I've ever had the pleasure to know. And I cherish his leadership and his friendship every single day, even to this day. He's still in charge of our university. So I left on very good terms. And when my 5-year project was done with Warner Brothers, Dr. Larry Blocker, who came in as the director of the School of Music, and he had been friends. We've been friends for 30 plus years. And in that time, by the way, I was doing a meeting with him, and I was a meeting, and I was in Kansas, and we had lunch together, and he let me know that, hey, I'm looking to possibly move. And I knew that Troy, Dr. Dennison, was going to be stepping down, and we were going to be looking for a new director. I said, Larry, if Troy could really use your skill set, if you'd consider. He said, sure, I'd consider applying. So I made a call. I called a couple of phones at Troy University campus. I wasn't teaching there at the time, but called and talked to a couple of people, and they agreed to review his application. And here we go. That's all I did. Then Dr. Blocker made the short list, and Dr. Blocker's had a tremendous impact, not only as director of our School of Music, but also our dean. Well, Dr. Blocker, we had lunch again now. This has been up 2005. And we had lunch again, and he had recently taken the job. And he said, "You remember that music industry proposal?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, it's passed. We need somebody we're looking to open up a position, have somebody come manage and coordinate this." So it was at a time where, yes, I could do this. I'd gone through some personal challenges. Most of it centered around a hurricane in Florida. I lost my home in 2004. Hurricane Ivan came and literally took out our house. And so I'm trying to make sure I'm supporting my family and doing the best for my family. Mm-hmm. And so there was an opportunity to kind of go home. And so took that opportunity. And so that was 14 years ago. In fact, today I turned in my final grades this morning at 9 a.m. And that marks the end of the 14th year in this round at Troy University. And that's all music industry. So what is music industry? It is it's the entire world, music and entertainment industries. And those that just think through, those that want to get involved in music of all types, whether it's writing for the concert stage, writing for films, writing for gaming, video games. That's a significant market, significant artistic experience, and also a significant business. The record industry, arts management, instrument manufacturing, audio engineering, production of albums, production of all forms of media. And so our proposal that we put at Troy that we've now manifested into a full-blown program, it's a music industry program. It's a little bit of a biosphere of the music industry. And so our students work together in a real-world scenario to be able to understand and be successful in what it takes to work in the music industry. As a result, we have about anywhere from 10 to a dozen graduates a year. Generally 66% to 75% of them are employed as they walk across the stage to get their diploma. And they're working in some pretty high level positions now. We have people working with major artists. I mentioned a while ago, Kelly, Nick, your wife, she was one of our early music industry students. When we started that program, she was, in fact, our Ilium Records, our record label, that's her graphic design. She was a graphic arts and design. That's still her. She's the one that branded that for us, and it still exists today. What a legacy she left. She was also a great songwriter and a great vocalist, and it's really interesting to watch her career, not only in education, but also in the industry. And Kelly represents in a different way what I've done in my life, where we're blending education and the music and entertainment industry. And so you live that every single day, and you know what I'm talking about. So this program is pretty significant. We have over 100 students involved in our program. We have a little over 80 majors, and then we have a lot of minors, people who are going to major in business and minor in music industry, major in broadcast and minor in music industry, major in graphic design and minor in music industry, much like Kelly did. And so it's a pretty significant program. We're very, very proud of it. We've got film composers coming out of this. We've got pop songwriters. We've got artists. We have people working now at major publishers. We have people working in Nashville with major artists in major areas and ways. And we have people working in New York now, incredible. We have people working in Orlando, an entertainment capital there. So we're very, very proud of our students and very proud of the program. It's a very real world program that gives students a vision probably beyond what they could have anticipated coming out of a public school band room, choir room, orchestra room.
That is for sure. It wasn't there when we were there because it was music education or choral education. Well, not really, just music education.
Music ed, yep, just music ed.
Yeah, and gosh, it's amazing to see how much it's changed in the past just 20 years with music education in general. But where was I going with that? I had somewhere to go. My brain just left me. But music is an everlasting changing. It's done wonders for me. Do you have any advice for any current high school kids that are seeking to go to college, or what anything? What kind of advice would you give current? If you could have a one-on-one time with a Jeff Davis student, what would you tell them?
Absolutely. And this pandemic that we're in right now probably has brought this into focus better than ever before. No matter what area you're going to go in, there are basic human characteristics that are absolutely essential to our future. One is going to be creativity. Okay, we have got to find new ways to do things with existing resources. And it's going to take creative skills to be able to do that. If that means, how do you teach a band program when you're not together? Well, you guys have had to be very creative to come up, even with this little podcast video blog kind of series. But you have ways to keep your students engaged. We're having to be creative to do that. Fortune 500 companies, this is our resources. This is what we want to do. How do we make this happen? Creativity. The only place creativity is being firmly addressed in our schools are going to be in our arts classrooms. Okay, it's going to be those in music and visual arts and theater, performing arts of all types. So no matter what your field of endeavor, what you're learning right now in the Jeff Davis Band and the Jeff Davis Arts classrooms is going to apply to every facet of your life. The second big picture characteristic that we need to be successful in our world, it's going to be communication skills, collaboration and communication. Learning to work with others as a team, learning to communicate with others. We do that in band every single day. The band, it's like a baseball team. A baseball team can't win by itself. It takes 9 players to get out there and do it, and they all got to be good. In the case of a band, there is no bench in the band. Everybody's got to be good. We've all got to play. We've all got to do our part. Right? And so we're learning collaboration in the most elegant way. We're learning leadership. We're learning how to have an artistic vision and then bring that with a group of people to life. And then how to communicate in order to be able to make that happen. The skills we're learning there apply to every field of endeavor. All right. And then the final thing that I do want to point out that we're learning in our arts classrooms, particularly in things like band, is work ethic. How do we stick to this to bring it to fruition? It's really great to say, hey, boy, that we can put a halftime show out there, but the amount of hours your students in your band, incoming freshmen, you don't know yet, but everybody else knows how many hours it takes to get that show fully produced. And think through production. If we're going to bring a new car to the market, we have to design the car, and then we actually have to figure out the process, and we actually have to build the car to have it come out with impeccable quality. It looks like it's just a 10-second moment that rolls off, a showroom floor, but no, there are countless immeasurable hours that went into that. And so we're learning that entire process. So whether you're going into the arts, going into entertainment or not, what you're learning right now in your band class, the Jeff Davis Band, is going to apply to everything that you do. So please make sure you take advantage of that. Going to college, whether you're going to be a music major, arts major or not, join the band. It's a way to find a home. It's a way to find a home base. Join the choir. Join that large student group that's going to give you friends all across campus. One of where the pandemic, I won't call it does us a favor. The pandemic does no favors. However, the pandemic has forced us to recognize the importance of human interaction, the importance of actually being close. We as humans, a universal human condition is that we want to be close to each other. And so when you get to a large college campus, sometimes it's really easy to get lost in that setting. Joining that band, joining those art classrooms, are going to really give you a home that is going to pay untold dividends in everything else you're doing. So I'd really look at that very carefully, very, very carefully. Make sure that, again, stay involved in the arts. And those of you who are going to go into the arts, wonderful. Those of you that are not, you're going to know enough about it to be incredible supporters of the arts. As teachers, and Mr. Asathiu and Mr. Oliver right now are just now beginning to understand. But when the greatest gift we get as a teacher is when we start teaching the children of our children, when they start coming into the classroom and all of a sudden they're doing something. I think I saw Kelly had some videos of some elementary students doing some re-lyricking of some country hits, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah,
really pretty cool thing, I got to tell you, when I sit there and go, that was a big payday for me. Here it is. Here's one of my former students using this art of music and her gifts. And look what it's doing for this next generation. When those band students of Jeff Davis start sending their children into your band room, now you know you've done something. Music is about connection. It's about connecting at the purest level. And what we can learn from that, again, is immeasurable. So stay the course and make sure you're a sponge and grasp every concept that we learn in this unbelievable art form called music.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That's incredible. I think not only for a kid, but that's good for a teacher or anybody. Just stay involved and love music and get your kids involved in music and just do it. So.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. Well, we've been doing this for right about 50 minutes. It doesn't feel like 50 minutes, but we know you're an incredibly busy man, and we don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we really appreciate you. I appreciate you just giving up your afternoon to come on and chat with us and chat with the kids and the community of Jeff Davis and the internet. Josh Scalf said this was the best internet radio television show to come out of Hazelhurst, Georgia. So we appreciate you being a part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Number one, Hazelhurst. You got it. Yeah.
So, we own the market.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, Hazelhurst is a special place, though, with the quality of life there. What a great town. And a great place to raise your kids and work.
So many people have asked me, why did you move from Panama City to go to Hazelhurst? I said, that's because you haven't been to Hazelhurst yet. It is a great place. And, I love the beach. I love the golf. But there is something about taking your top on, doors off in your Jeep, and just going there in the country riding and then coming back and just going on the lake on a boat. I mean, it's just there's something about it.
People ask me why I live in Troy, Alabama. I got to tell you, it's not much difference between Troy and Hazelhurst, except we have a major university here,
Yeah.
But a couple more stoplights.
Yeah. The quality of life here is just amazing, and my wife, Susan, and I have been saying it every single day. If we're going to be quarantined somewhere, we're thankful to be here.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, we appreciate you coming on with us again. We're going to be kind of on a hiatus for a little bit for the Jagged Jive for everybody watching. We're going to pull our ducks together and get back at it and kind of close up shop for this school year and get ready for the next school year with the marching band and kind of figure out what's going to go on this summer. I know that things are not quite yet settled, but we'll figure it out, and we're going to have a better than usual next year too, for year 2 for the new staff here at Jeff Davis. We appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you on the other side.